Welcome to another Learning Council podcast. This is your host, Leilani Cawthon, CEO and publisher at Learning Council News Media and Research. So our topic today is going to be closing math learning gaps, data-driven instruction. I'm really kind of excited about this because, I've been on the road for a while. I'm probably going to, punch in some comments on that. But I have with me my good friend who is, let me see, I got to get your whole thing out here, Brandon. Brandon Smith, and I want to introduce him to you again. So he's the lead mathematician and product director at Mind Education, where he creates experiential learning programs for people of all ages, which is fantastic, both in and out of the classroom, including two that are patent pending, two of them.
Yeah, two.
Oh, Brandon. Yeah. So over the past several years, he has focused on developing innovative projects to close what he calls the math experience gap. I love this idea. So anyway, where children have insufficient exposure to math in their daily lives, these projects include interactive exhibits and games for math fairs, math camps, and family math nights. And early in this national rollout of the sixth grade, I'm backing up. So earlier in your career, you designed mathematical requirements for the game-based SC Math software. That's the name of your software. Okay.
Yep, yep.
And you led the national rollout of the sixth grade SC Math curriculum. That must have been a whirlwind. And then you also co-authored a paper in cognitive science research principles and implications. I'm stumbling on big words today. Sorry about that. And you've written for Huffington Post.
Mm-hmm.
And you presented at ISTE. And then, prior to that, you were a college instructor. You won an outstanding teacher award. You were a liaison in education for the city of Costa Mesa to Wyndham, Australia, which is super fun. Bachelor's of Math, 2 master's degrees in pure and applied mathematics. And then you also pilot planes. I mean, we can go on the piloting planes thing for the
Yeah,
next
let's
half
just talk
hour.
about that. Why not?
Yeah, that'd be super fun. Well, this is exciting to have you with us because I will just mention right off the bat that I realize there are big gaps in what's going on with
Hmm.
math instruction.
Yes.
There's also a lot of work that we've been doing because my new book is coming out on the human singularity, on intelligences. We've named one the formational intelligence. We rewrote Gartner's 9, which I think I want to talk to you about maybe in another time. But mathematical logical, we've been focused on for a long time. But what's now happening is that even though we seem to focus on it in education, we've got lower scores nationwide, right?
Yeah, it's not trending up. It's been trending down for some time. And so I think that that doesn't mean you get lost in the problem, right? You want to focus on solutions and really try to understand and what can we do about it. But if we're continuing down this trajectory where things haven't really turned that corner in the direction we want, we have to look at what are the actions and things that we're doing. Because if we perpetuate the same things or anything close to the same things we've already been doing, we're going to ultimately be in the same result. We want to look at ways to really turn the corner. And that's where
Yeah.
this conversation today, I'm excited about data-driven instruction, taking a different lens on it, rather than just looking at are students getting the answer right or are they getting the answer wrong. That's one type, but there's a lot of things we can do just right there in the moment around the classroom feel and the classroom experience.
Yeah, I love the idea of just using that word experience because you're talking now about something that is, what you should have happen for the individual, where they're interacting with math, where they're doing things that is different than, a lot of what's being talked about now in the field, which is just the scores and just the things.
Hmm.
And then people trying different methods. I mean, education can be so trendy, right? It's
Of
like big
course, yeah.
waves of trends come in and big waves of trends go out. So what's your point of view on this whole thing with student experience and learning math? How do you sum that up?
I think the easiest sort of takeaway is that if we're seeing achievement gaps or seeing achievement trend the wrong way, rather than seeing that as the problem, look at that as the symptoms that we see. And now we need to look at what's the core problem? What are the core solutions we go about that? So if you did this with you're going to the doctor, you do go to the doctor with your symptoms, and they need to diagnose what the actual root issue is, and then that's what they're treating. They don't just treat the symptom necessarily by itself. You want to get to the root cause. And so my ultimate claim is that the more we worry about achievements, the more we're focused on test scores, then the more we're going to fall into the trap of trying to explain math better or faster. And the
Mm,
problem with that is that you and I now are having the same experience that we had 20 or 30 years ago, where a kid is sitting and absorbing information, hopefully, fingers crossed. And what I'm saying is flipping it and saying, instead of looking at all the how well we explain math or illustrate or draw pictures, what are students doing? But
mm,
it's that learning by doing means I have to take action before I know if what I'm about to do is going to work or not. But I take
mm.
that act anyway. And so that's really where I think so much of the bang for the buck moves can be, is how do we look at student doing as opposed to just explaining and re-explaining.
Yeah, I really like that because I think that's where a lot of teachers fall down is, they're teaching to multi-level abilities, right? You may have
Yep.
what you think is a ninth grade class or a seventh grade class, but there's kids sitting in there that are 4, 5, 6 grades behind. So they don't even know how to add and subtract, and you're trying to teach them higher math. That's a very difficult thing to try to organize in the classroom. So what you end up
Absolutely.
doing is just being a totally busy bee, right? Like running around. So the ability for you to just sort of co-create with, students having an experience with doing something, but you're there on tap. I don't think
I
they
mean, if
can
you
do it.
can,
I don't think it's a human job.
I mean, if the way you explain it, all of a sudden you feel the stress and the cortisol start to
Yeah.
raise up. You're like, oh man, this feels impossible. But
Yeah.
nevertheless, we're tasking our teachers with, arguably the impossible. And they're hanging in there and they're doing it every single day. What we haven't done a great job of is providing that sort of curricular side that gets students in the driver's seat more. So what I'm getting at, here's just one quick example. Rather than, okay, how well did I explain it? If I was focused on if I explained math well, I did this when I was giving a class. It was if my students started getting it right away. I'm like, yes. That's like if I could explain you to shoot hoops and all of a sudden you made every free throw you ever tried. Like it
Yeah.
sounds like it makes me feel really good. The problem is that students didn't get the benefit of messing up and having to creatively figure things out. I was focused on if I explained it well, you'd start getting it right. What that also then meant is that my students were creating a learned helplessness because if I didn't explain it well, in my mind, they would sit and wait, or you change the numbers on the math problem and they just sit, I'm talking about, they just sit on their hands
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're not even trying. And one way you could look at the data-driven instruction here, if you were just observing a class or you're the teacher in the class, just an example, is give students a problem without a lot of pre-teaching, minimal, maybe none, as little as possible, and have the students try it. How many students are going to sit on their hands, so to speak, or the moment they get stuck, just give up? That's that learned helplessness. It's not the natural human state. We want to figure things out and overcome. We feel powerful and empowered, and we find joy in that kind of struggle. So that's a data point you can take. All right, how many students had a really rough start? And you can iterate. You can maybe lower the floor as appropriate height in the ceiling. Get students and now do the same thing. How many students got up and running without me having to do the big heavy lift? It's a completely
Right.
different data-driven approach than how many students started getting this right away. It's how many students started problem solving right away. And I can just observe that in the classroom. I mean, you could just scan the classroom and be like, yeah, there's like 6 or 7 kids, or there's 20 kids, or all of them, or none of them. And you don't have to just look at a big data profile of student test scores or even daily test scores or exit tickets. Not that those things are terrible. It's that if we're not looking at data around what the student experience is like, then my claim is that we're still going to see the math scores continue to move in this direction. And it would be amazing if we could turn that corner.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, but I'm putting myself now, just like you just did, in this teacher's seat, right? And they're used to, a lot of worksheets,
Hmm.
maybe some going up to the whiteboard because Blackboard's been pulled out now, right? And doing some demo of how you do this and assigning, chapters or PDFs that they pushed out in the learning management system. Um, and then they're expecting performance. How much, even before the brilliant program that you've created came out, were people actually, did you talk to teachers? They walk around the room and check everyone? Like that doesn't really happen, right? Like they don't do that anymore.
We've had a predominance of where we walk around and we're looking for mistakes. And what I'm
Oh,
saying is walk around and
yeah.
look for engagement and
Yeah, I remember
hard
that. I remember
and
looking for
hard work.
mistakes.
I
Like
mean, we
that's
all
what they
do,
would do with us.
or we all did. And what you typically did, if a kid got it right, I'd walk by and I'd see Leilani over here and you're crushing it. I'm like, really nice work. Good job. Keep it up. And I move on. However, that student still benefits from understanding why they're right,
Ooh,
because we learn the best kind of practice we can have is when we build those internal representations that guide our thinking. So there's a book on it by Anders Ericsson. He talks about the idea of deliberate practice, where you build basically an internalized sense of what success looks and feels like and why. So you and I, we might be able to solve a math problem on paper. We could hold the paper up, we could look at it, we could check our own work, let's say, so to speak, because we have a lot of internalized mechanisms. But those don't just exist because they're explained. You actually have to practice your way into them. And so
yeah,
when I'm a student and I get it right, that does not mean I have the internal sort of feel and representations for it to be able to extend over and over. And what that means is that formative feedback where it carries meaningful information that encourages me as a problem solver to keep going and trying. And I understand why something is working or not is just as important when I'm getting the right answer as when I'm getting the wrong answer. And if we are walking through the math class and I'm looking for kids that have mistakes, because again, I want performance, I want achievement, I want right answers, I'm leaving out the whole group of students that may have just been able to memorize the answer to that problem, but they
yeah.
weren't engaging in the problem solving and the creative thinking in quite the way we want. And so
Well, I really like this. I really like that you're saying this way because I know I talked to an administrator, I don't know, must have been mid last year. I remember her describing to me it wasn't enough to have kids in a program that they didn't check, like the people that actually know the subject, check for understanding periodically and really get into the space, the eyeball to eyeball with kids. They were still moving forward, but then all of a sudden would just come to a violent stop. And the unraveling of that was really hard on teachers.
sure,
So
yeah.
essentially what you're saying is that the experience has to be such that you're truly building the underlying stuff in order to get to the other stuff. And there's the only way you can do that is with enough of a quality experience in order to be able to move ahead. And I like that thinking because
And this is
otherwise, yeah, you're that poor teacher in the front of the room going, those kids are never going to get it. I don't know where they went wrong, but bleh.
this is why like a really good self-paced program has its value because that keeps all kids in their driver's seat working and figuring stuff out when you have that mastery approach. And it allows you as a teacher or as administrator or a math coach to go around and work with students individually, but also look at overall engagement level. So even ed tech products, there's some out there where kids really don't have that much, they don't have high time on math. They might be doing some random stuff, and then the math problem pops up, and it's basically the exact same problem as you saw on the worksheet, and the feedback is about as useful. And it goes, you got it right, you got it wrong,
Yeah.
and that's it. And then what do I do? I just give the kid the problem again? Do I just constantly back them up to give them an easier problem, hoping that a trail of right answers are going to help them? No, they've already made it to here. The issue right there in the moment is that there's something with their thinking. And the digital experience in that particular example didn't have meaningful feedback. That's a part of this student experience. That if I see kids working on stuff, I want to know how many kids are just solving rote stuff, like they're just occupying their time solving rote stuff. They're only solving what they can memorize, versus how many kids are actually iterating their thinking. And I would love to see a classroom where all kids are, I mean, it's almost so busy. It's like herding cats, to get their attention back, but in a good way. And they're busy, they're on task, they're figuring things out. And you
Yeah.
see them apply creative, iterative thinking. Like, okay, that's the kind of classroom experience I want to see more of. And imagine you do that at scale, day in and day out. Those are the things I'm claiming are going to make big moves towards turning that trajectory with math performance.
Yeah, so I'm understanding that where you're doing this is with data-driven instruction in play within the visual math games that Mind Education puts out with ST Math, right? The program is ST Math, and that those are important because you're looking at better benchmarks, right? So talk to me about that interplay right there. So how many math problems, how many minutes, what is the teacher seeing? How skilled does the teacher have to be? Because so much loss of teachers is like districts and schools throwing in somebody who's like marginally good at math themselves.
Hmm.
So you have a bigger problem than maybe the scores of the students. So talk to me about that, like, because I just threw a lot at you, but you go.
Yeah, so a lot of powerful points. If one of the powerful components of individual practice that I build, that internal representation, we call it
Yeah.
schema, but it's the same idea where I can see it, I can feel it, and I can gauge if something is on the right track or not. And I understand how it works and how it feels. Allowing something to be visual is really powerful. But it's not just the visual itself. It's that I'm building my capacity to think in the pictures that I have. If I just show a visual on the board, there's some research out that says that that actually creates more deceptive clarity. That feeling that I've learned it, it felt easy. I felt like I learned it. Oh, I get it. But it was easy come, easy go. The clarity isn't going to live, and part of that is because kids are still passive, right? If I'm absorbing a paragraph on the whiteboard, or a picture on the whiteboard, or a paragraph in a book, or a picture in a book, or on a video, I'm still just passively having information absorbed in through my senses and hoping
Yeah.
that I'm going to store all that. And what I like with visuals is that they can create an interactive world where I'm not absorbing, I'm doing, that I am figuring something out. I have no idea what to do to solve this problem, but I'm going to try something. And now I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow as I go,
So
as
what this
opposed
is
to
telling
sitting
me is
waiting.
that what this is telling me is that what you're saying is there's different modalities, maybe a scale where if I'm looking at something only or I'm being told something only, the biophysical energy, which is a different it's a different nature of energy than regular electricity. The biophysical energy I'm putting into it is a different level than when I'm doing it, right? Like I'm
Mhm.
moving my arms right now for the people that are listening. Like I'm being physical. I'm not actually dancing, but I'm being physical, right? I'm applying something that has dimension in like, it's three-dimensional here. What you're saying is that when you invite the student to do dimensional mental acrobatics, not just flat take a picture like a camera can do, it has a different later engagement pattern. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, you're fundamentally changing your experience now. I mean,
Yeah.
think of the difference. I'm sitting and I'm watching somebody swing a golf club or shoot hoops. Or as a kid, it's always the worst for me if we didn't have enough controllers. Remember back in the day when controllers had wires on them and you couldn't just run seven? I'm like, oh, it's not my turn. And I just have to
Yeah.
sit and wait. And it was like, I had to fight off boredom or something because I just
Yeah.
wanted to do it. the human mind and body is designed to really do things. And as a result of doing, I think and process and figure out. I learn about the world by going out and walking around it and exploring. I need to be active, engaging in that spatial and temporal reasoning. That same type of thinking is the foundation for human thought, even what we would say is a more abstract level. But if I'm
Mhm.
just sitting and I'm waiting and I'm just absorbing, I'm not actually doing any of the thinking. I'm not actually persevering through hard problems and struggling. And what we want to see a math class do, I would claim, is that we want students to come out of it as creative and critical and iterative and innovative thinkers that are able to apply that thinking into the world around them. In other words, we want to build the capacity to solve challenging problems and to stick with them. Because if all we can do is the simple stuff, I mean, the simple answer is that AI is going to replace so much of that and
Yeah,
at a breakneck pace that
yeah,
the the requirement for us as people to have done a lot of just the mundane stuff is going to begin to shift. And that means we really need to be raising students up to do a lot of that imaginative, creative problem solving. And so to me, those are the kinds of data that you can capture when you just walk into a classroom. So for example, how many students started solving a math problem within the first 10 minutes of class? And you want that answer to be every student, not the ones, not that I asked a question to everybody and one student responded. I'm saying every single student in that classroom is thinking and reasoning and problem solving within the first 10 minutes. If you can get it to 5 minutes, that's great. You know, things are going to ebb and flow. When kids are solving problems, how many of them are just solving the easy ones and sitting and just, just waiting for the teacher with the hard ones versus how many students are at least willing to give a novel problem a try? And I can just
yeah,
look and be like, I don't see enough students trying something yet that they don't already have the answer to. Let's look at those data points and say, how can we bump those up? How many problems or are students solving in the course of this classroom without me doing a hefty dose of pre-teaching? And we
yeah.
can look at all of those in real time, and those are experiential data points that are
Mm.
showing us if students are demonstrating the kinds of behaviors we're going for. And my claim is that if you really look in on those and you begin to amplify those in the way that you want to go, we're going to see the test scores move. If I'm just
Yeah,
focused on achievement, I'm going to focus on how do I explain and I re-explain. I might even have a deficit lens about kids. Kids just can't do this. And now I
yeah,
feel the effort to have to work harder to explain it better. And now you can see there's this vicious spiral that
right.
we
Yeah.
get stuck in.
Yeah, and then there's like group agreement, like, some kids can't learn math, like, which is a lie. How much do you think that's really going on? Right? Where there's just like we just gave up on this one over here and that one over there, and we're just moving on. I mean, when you're talking about building skills by doing, which is super fun in math, everyone should be able to do that. I mean, I can't think it's
Absolutely.
an intelligence only now that science has proven that IQ can be increased, that we have to give up, right? So what you're saying is that this method, the how you do it is kind of everything.
I think so. Or it's at least it's a highly under appreciated, underutilized component.
Yeah.
Almost nothing is just going to be a pendulum swing, where
Yes.
you just do all of something to the exclusion of everything else. But what I'm saying is that the pendulum, so to speak, the balance scale has not had enough of this experiencing math. There's been a lot of explaining of math. And so if we can embrace putting students in the driver's seat and having them figure stuff out, we are a whole lot better off. And we did this, just here's an example. We did this with community engagement. So some years ago, we knew it was important to reach the community, right? The the network that you and I would have as students, our village, so to speak, the value, the anxiety, the way in which we would view math or engage in math is going to rub off on our kids. They don't osmosis our knowledge, but they do mimic our attitudes. And so
You
we're like,
just
okay,
made osmosis a verb. That was awesome.
yeah,
It
I
is a
did.
verb, right? Or a noun.
I just made it one, so let's say yes.
Yeah, let's say yes. Okay,
Let's
good.
say yeah. And so we did what everybody else would do. We did the family math nights, and we saw that parents would basically just sit like this, waiting for the kid to do the work. And we tried, oh, well, we just need really good facilitators, which is, yeah, great, wonderful. Those are good things. But
Yeah,
fundamentally, the parent experience didn't change. See, I'm trying to solve the problem by something outside of the parent. And instead, we said, look, let's keep this really simple. Look at a family math night, and we just want to count in 5 seconds, roughly speaking, how many cell phones are out. And I'm not worried like if you checked your phone and then you put your phone right back down. I'm saying that a parent is disengaged from the task with their kid because they are on their phones. I called it the cell phone metric. Great. The first time I did it, I want to say it was like 20 or 30 out of 100 people. Like it was really high. And so we started saying, okay, how do we get that number down? And not how do I coerce you to get the number down? That's me trying to social engineer people. And we said,
yeah,
rather change the experience of the math itself. So how the math is engaged, all of this, we ended up using storybooks because stories have a great feeling that a parent feels capable. They feel
yes,
empowered. They're not a mathematical third wheel. It's a story.
yeah.
We found that when we did that, parents would play the game longer. They would play with more strategy. They would have more fun. And we got it down to less than 3 cell phones for every 100 people, from 30 down to 3.
Wow.
We then hosted a family math night with 500 people using this approach. And at one point in time, I saw only 3 cell phones out for 500 people. And that's what I
Wow.
mean by switching the data. I was looking at data based on what parents weren't doing, and I switched it saying, what is the experience not doing with an asset lens? Parents already have everything they need. We need to provide an experience to turn that kinetic. And you can see now, switch my data-driven instruction, so to speak, was the cell phone metric. Was not looking at performance or just if people got the right answer or the wrong answer. I was looking at how many people disengaged to the point that they said, this is not for me, and stuck the phone in their face. That's the
Yes,
kind of data-driven, experience gap-focused, data-driven instruction that the more we can move and look at those components, the more we can assess whether or not our curriculum or our ed tech solution is satisfying those experiential requirements. We're going to find that my claim is that we're going to find that the test scores move. And we know that, at least from the ST Math side of the house, that test scores at scale grow and improve when students do it. So we have a good foundation to say this is something that we could be looking at very broadly across the board. And math needs us to really push student thinking, reasoning, and problem solving. I think it's one of the primary solutions as we move forward, because I think what can happen is AI can actually make these gaps worse because
yeah. And I would agree with you on that.
some are going to
Yeah, because
use
what I'm seeing in the field right now, Brandon, just so you know, is a lot of attention. I mean, I don't know, it's almost like some sort of like magic genie came out of the bottle and like it's all AI and blah 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 blah. And every one of my events and so far this year, like I'm going out on meetings, talking to people about it. And I am distinguishing the fact that AI is not an attention, it doesn't have a quality of being able to drive attention. It's just a chat bot. At least the consumer versions right now
yeah.
are built for you to interact with like a chat bot. They're not structured attention channeling, right? Like courseware is, like what your
Yeah,
product
yeah.
is, right? So there's no scaffolding to it. It's just like you're all in the deep end of the pool immediately. And so the solution that I'm hearing from educators is like, well, you got to guide how they're allowed to question it. Well, good luck with that because it's still wide open. It's not doing anything thrilling. Yes, it can generate a picture after you ask it what you want, right?
Sure.
It's not dimensional in any other way. And so what you're really telling me is that the dimensional experience of this, which, motion, audio, screen moving around is at least two-dimensional, right? Like it's not a teacher is three-dimensional. So she's standing up there, he's standing up there, he's doing things with you. You add those two things together, and then you have a channeled experience of math absorption that's different than like, just asking somebody, how do I do fractions, right? Like how dumb
Yeah,
is
because
that?
if I'm going to interact with a chat bot and it's going to provide me, even if it's a generative AI explanation, it is still just an explanation that I have to read and absorb, even if it has pictures in it. So it's not asking me to take action and solve something and getting meaningful, formative feedback on what I'm doing. And now I apply iterative thinking. It
Yeah,
almost feels like I'm providing answer getting tools. And what I'm saying is we want more of the iterative thinking because otherwise the gaps could grow. Because if some of
right,
us use AI to replace our thinking and others of us use it to enhance our thinking, we are going to be in very different places. And so I don't yet see how in an educational setting as it's engaged with now, that AI is going to be the magic pill that we were hoping for. Because again, it's primarily providing explanations that I passively absorb. And
right,
Harvard already did a study some years ago in fourth and fifth grade saying that the different textbooks that you use, even if you pick a textbook that you really love, it's still just a textbook.
right. It's
It
not
had
an
no impact on student
experience.
learning because I'm trying to explain or download the information from my brain into your brain, but yet it's not changing the student experience from when you or I were kids or our parents were kids. If we're just
Yeah.
reading a book and absorbing, we're still just reading and absorbing.
Yeah. So talk to me about the math experience as a game in ST math, because I just want people to hear you talk about what that would feel like, what it looks like.
Yeah, so ST Math is creating fundamentally interactive models of how math works. So let's take the number line, for example. It's really common on a number line for kids to do the discrete intervals, and then you say something like 3 plus 5, they count out 3, they stop, they count out 5 more. And that is a counting mechanic. The number line, though, is really a traveling mechanic that if I'm going to travel from 0 to 1, I'm covering all the spots in between. It's not a discrete, I have a whole block and another block and another block. It's I traveled, just like the odometer in my car will go up, up, up as I'm traveling. I had to travel the whole mile in order to get the mile. So what
Mm,
ST Math will do is create interactive games around traveling on a number line, traveling forward, traveling backwards, on an open number line. You can turn hash marks or the tick marks on a number line on and off. And by making it interactive, a couple of really awesome things happen. One, there's no achievement gap. Think of video games. There is no achievement gap in video games. All kids are capable of doing it, regardless of the demographics that we keep seeing create. We keep seeing these demographics in math education, right? And how disparate they are. Those don't happen in some of these other places because when it's interactive, you're meeting people where they are and you're getting people to do something very natural for them. We want to see something to figure it out and feel powerful when we overcome it. And so ST Math creates math, turns math into something very interactive. And it's leveraging spatial temporal reasoning. In other words, the same thinking we do when we look around and make sense of the world. Mathematics is that leverages the same kind of thinking. And so now you've got something that's very natural for all humans. It's reaching us at a human level. And as students are reasoning and problem solving, the beauty is you don't need to give them all the instructions. You need to give them really meaningful feedback and progress them forward, keeping them in that state of productive struggle. And so what
yeah.
happens is that you end up, that is one approach you end up getting really powerful data-driven instruction outcomes if you're looking at the way I'm talking about. So how many problems had to be pre-taught in order for students to get up and running? The answer is zero. That's amazing. Think of
Yeah,
trying to get all students to solve a problem without pre-teaching in some other way. It's very hard. How many
yeah.
problems are kids solving in the course of, let's say, a 20-minute, 30-minute session? It's significantly more than what you're going to
Wow.
get on a worksheet. So you get these experiential changes that are really palpable if you look at it in that lens. And then it turns
Yeah.
out the performance also improves if what you do want to see are improved test scores. But it's
But I
because
think
you're
what I
not
want,
moving.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think what I want to point out to whoever's listening or watching right now that you're saying is that math has been the same experience as reading black and white words or in literature, like the reading experience. It's been sort of like a reading experience with the difference between a flat book and a movie, right? So or going to Disney World, right? Or any sort of
Yeah.
amusement park. When you move into that dimensional three dimensions of things, two dimensions movie, three dimensions go to the amusement park. The two dimensions what you guys are doing, right? You're actually showing, and it's almost three-dimensional because some of the objects in the images and the sounds are moving, so you have a kinesthetic to it that is not the same as just looking at something on a screen at all, right? It's actually doing things that is giving the feeling of motion. So it almost moves into that third dimension. But then when the teacher adds in additional things, right? Like just, how many is that or whatever, when they're actually teaching alongside the program, now you have all three dimensions. And math is a dimensional language. It's
Yeah,
not flat
absolutely.
like language, like regular English or whatever. It's actually trying to speak in dimension.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's supposed to form structure in your mind. And if we don't understand that that's what you're doing with the mind, is you're trying to teach it to think in quantities that structure things, like the sides of a cube, a triangle, blah, 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 8 sides to the whole cube. If you don't understand that's where you're going with math, then you're still teaching it like you would teach it English in a
Yeah, I
very
mean,
flat way.
math is
Hopefully, I'm
meant to
getting
be
this right.
experienced. You know,
Yeah,
the multi-dimensional example that you're providing, that I think the big umbrella is that life, just like math, is meant to be experienced.
right,
And even the best books, even if you're thinking of a flat book and you're reading a novel or a joke or humor,
right,
create an experiential element. The best novels, you feel like you were there.
right,
And if it's just words on a page, it's not necessarily going to create that experience. One of the powerful experiences for learning are ones in which I try something. It works or
right,
not, but I see why it worked or
right,
not, and I get another go at it. And so that ability to be in the driver's seat before I know the answer and to receive formative feedback as I go is one of those critical learning components. And outside of math, in some ways, it's almost obvious because we do it inherently. But in math class, when we become so worried about achievement and performance, it's as if we leave those multidimensional elements out. And my proposal is that we look for ways to bring them back in. And a good place to start is to gauge how students are experiencing math in the classroom. And then as you're testing things, look at how those numbers are changing. So, for example, I said, I would love to see in every classroom, every student is tasked with solving a math problem early on. Let's call it 10
right.
because I mean you've got all kinds of things that pop up at the beginning of a class. I went to a math class. This was it was a third grade class a little over a year ago, and I ran that metric. How long into the class until every kid was meaningfully tasked with solving a problem, and one of them was 45 minutes.
Wow, that's too long.
That meant for 44 minutes, a lot of kids were just sitting and waiting. And so there we can look and say, okay, I want to try next time I run this lesson. How do I get kids to solve problems sooner? And now
Right.
that is a data-driven assessment that I can formatively now, I can make a change to my teaching practice, for example, if that's the approach that we're taking. Whereas if I just looked at performance at the end, it's a lot harder.
Yeah, so I think what I want to do with you is just run really fast, like a fast answer, because we're running out of time. But fast answer a few more questions for me. So, what can be done in classes for math right now? Because we start out better experience is the answer to the dropping scores. So let's go at a little bit of detail. Let's do a fast round on it. What can you do in class using your data and benchmark, regardless of the curriculum that you've been shoved at you from your district or your school?
Get as many students figuring things out before you've explained it as possible. Have them try and struggle and go through that. If that feels really scary, offer a progression of puzzles. That low floor, high ceiling as a progression. Get kids going and see how far down that progression they can go. It's a really powerful way around it.
Okay, good. You just feel like you got on a game show. Question number 2, Brandon.
I don't have a buzzer though. I need a buzzer.
Yeah, you get the buzzer. So the difference with ST Math, guidance or prompting questions, teachers versus just trying to teach the topic more focused on the student. So where's the difference maker?
Primary difference maker is that we're saying that learning is a human experience. So you start with the human and you design in math experiences that work for them. And
Okay.
when you have a one-to-one software, kids can work at their own pace. But we also know that working together with one another, like we're doing now, and talking student to student, not just hub
Yeah.
and spoke, is also an incredibly powerful dimension to that learning that we want to
Social energy.
Yeah, it's huge. It's massive. It's great to be by yourself, but it's also great to be in a group.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so 3, do you think explaining the rules of the game slows kids down?
I would say explain the least amount possible. And if you can get away with none, that's great. It's really hard if it's a physical game. But if it's a lot
Yeah.
of work to explain the game, you're going to kill excitement and anticipation because kids are like, oh my goodness. So you want
Oh
games that
yeah, that's like Christmas. Let's all have like a round of, discussion and, cakes and cookies before you're allowed to open the
no, I
present.
just want to
Like,
go. I just want to
doesn't
go.
go well with 5-year-olds,
To
right?
me, the best games are the ones where you can give it to the group and they're like, let's go. Yeah, they might have to figure stuff out, but they get up and running right away.
Okay. All right. So, so what should matter to the district math coach? What can they observe, and how long it took for every kid to solve a math problem? What should matter to them?
I think the underserved thing to look at are the student moves. Not just what is the teacher doing, that is important, but the student moves. Like I'm saying, how many kids, how many math problems are kids on average solving? How long are the students persisting when they're stuck before displaying learned helplessness? How many students, the student to student conversation, rather than hub and spoke answer back to the teacher. Those student moves are huge because if we change everything that we want to, but yet the student experience stays more or less the same, we haven't made the fundamental shifts that we need.
Yeah, and I love what we've talked about today, and I'm going to thank you. And I feel like we could talk for hours longer, but I think people got the main gist of what you were aiming at, which is really math should be an experience. It should be almost a dimensional experience, just the same way where, like I said, you're going to an amusement park, you're experiencing something, right? It should be more than just like work. I love that. All right. So, Brandon, this has been the topic of closing math learning gaps, data-driven instruction with Brandon Smith, my friend from ST Math at Mind Education. Thank you all for listening to another episode of the Learning Council's podcast. This has been your host, Leilani, with my friend Brandon. Keep listening and keep learning.